Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk to those in Eastern Canada that are involved in agriculture and also talk about Eastern Canada because it is going offline and it's going to continue to have losses as this grand solar minimum intensifies. June 6th, cold snap damages vineyards, Christmas trees. It's over a 50% loss in the vineyards so far. And then looking at the news roll here, it's frost warning, frost impacting, cold June for grapes, apple growers, fruit growers. And when you're using the words catastrophic in a news feed, that's rare. New Brunswick blueberries. But see, this is the thing. It started in 2012, the exact same area, the exact same crops, apples wiped out. It's been that repeatedly year upon year. And right next door is Greenland, and then we take a look. That blue line is the increase over last year's record increase of ice on Greenland. Temperatures are still a little bit below normal up in the North Pole. Atlantic multidecadal oscillation starting to turn cool, and this would explain why Eastern Canada and France are both experiencing losses with their vineyards. The climate's changing. The grand solar minimum is intensifying. Haskap berries. Again, this could be a switch crop, a superfood that provides us nutrition and an opportunity. And supplementing some of your own fresh vegetables with microgreens. Broccoli gives you this nice purple color. And this video is brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com, heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet. The links below in the description box, the Adapt 2030 link, along with all the links to tonight's stories in the video. If you're doing a case study on which areas on our planet are going to go offline first in terms of crop production, this is a perfect example right here, and I think it's the number one example to illustrate what's going to happen with other regions in the planet as we move forward into the intensification of the grand solar minimum. It's already happening here, and it's been a trend for the last 5 years in Eastern Canada. So this is what I wanted to go through today, specifically Ontario, Quebec, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and St. John's. These places have been getting record snows in June, blizzards in May, exceptionally late season snows, and a really early season snows as well. Record-breaking snows for the last 3 years in these exact same spots. So just even with the weather amplifying just the snow, you could look at this and say this is an area that's intensifying. Cold snap damages vineyards, Christmas trees. The media talks about lingering frosty weather. But the Christmas trees, those are set genetically for this type of cold weather. Now it's getting too cold for that to grow even. 15% losses in the province. And then widening out on what the next news feeds were on that right side there. Cold June for grapes. Frost warning, frost worries, Maritimes farmers. Frost impacting Christmas tree farms. The vineyards are having a very difficult time. They're talking about bringing helicopters in. They've lost at least 50% so far. Some areas even higher totals than that. So for example, at Benjamin Bridge Winery, it looks like they had a meeting of all the vineyards in the area, the growers and the owners, wine producers for that entire area. And they're talking about these vineyards haven't been threatened like this in at least 10 years. So at least it must be a cycle in 10 years if it's happening again. But moving forward, as we're seeing these weather changes due to shifting jet streams as our magnetosphere weakens further, if you're looking for any type of guidance or ideas, if you're farming up in this particular area of northeastern Canada, it's going to get cooler next year and the year after, at least until 2022. So now you need to start thinking about substitution crops. Are there such a thing at this latitude in this hardiness zone? And then there's always side links within the stories. Odd Ontario weather, weather damages crops in southern Ontario, drought in the east, rain on the prairies, Ontario farmers devastated by April frosts. What I want to do is bring you back here 6 years in time, 2012. This is in earnest, kind of when you started to see the losses in certain areas. It's just been repeating the cycle. It's the same crops, and it's amplifying the losses now. 2012, they were talking about, remember the fruits here, apples, peaches, cherries, and other fruits and berries. The plums took nearly 100% loss in Ontario. And if you take a look at the 2012 entries, in that same string came up Southern Europe now, concerns about frost damage, early stone fruit. This would be expected as the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation turns into its cool phase. Have a chart on that in just a second. And you'll see these older entries also talk about sudden flash freeze. Well, that's what we've been seeing again, but it's happening several times through the months in spring now, not just one single time. See, it's an amplification. It's happened 4 or 5 times. Now there's frost damage in Berwick. Fresh Plaza is running that down. Potatoes. Apple growers waiting for more frost and extreme low temperatures. Frost damage Nova Scotia. So it's just like a repeating Rolodex spinning back to the first card again here. And when you see news media headlines like catastrophic frost damage, that's huge. Media never uses these kinds of words. New Brunswick, blueberries. They had losses last year as well and the year prior. From 2014 to now, that has been a multi-year loss in the crops. So you can see also the trend on that direction. Here's that frost damage in Berwick. 20 to 25% of the potatoes. Now, when you look at these cycles in time and you start to see, are these cycles repeating? They're mapped out here for the temperatures changing across the continents over the thousands of years that we're looking at on the chart here. And from the left side of the chart there, that's back 2,000 years. You can see different warming, especially in Antarctica. And then it starts to turn cool. So when you hear about all these Antarctic temperatures being higher than today, we have to merely look back at what, 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 years ago and see that it was far warmer down there than today. Now, taking a step into the future, these are the solar cycles mapped out with the amount of solar activity. And solar activity drives climate, and solar activity is linked to crop production. And you see on the right side there, solar cycle 25 and 26 bring us back down to something as if we're in the Maunder minimum again. Now, for the fruit growers and anybody doing agriculture in eastern Canada, I wanted to show you this chart because as this wave widens, the things you're already seeing there with the wet, the cold, this is going to increase along with what you're seeing. The larger and the wider the wave is, the more intense the weather and the colder it's going to get. So looking over the next at least 4 to 5 years up there where you're farming, it's going to continue to get wetter and colder. This leaves you with the possibility of transitioning to new crops in that, let's say, hardiness zone that's going to shift even further south and make it cooler there all the time for farming from this point forward. So here's an example, Haskap berries. Great possibility for Canada. This superberry, it's a superfood. It withstands temperatures down to 40 below 0 Celsius. And I also want you to take a look at where this is. That green on the map is where we're talking about, specifically around the Great Lakes there too. Ontario lost a lot of corn production last year, and it's been a trend down even near the Great Lakes. So it seems that this whole provincial area as well as the northeast U.S. Now let's take a look at Baffin Island there, that first big long island that you see, and then Greenland off to the right or northeast. Now the thing about cycles is they come in shorter duration too. It always doesn't have to be a 400-year cycle, grand solar minimum, 2,200-year cycle, cycles of grand solar minimums. Well, here we have the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. It's a 60-year wave, a 60-year cycle. This is also responsible for the pulse water that goes up into the Arctic. And for the last several years of pulses, it's been warmer than usual. That explains some of the ice loss up there. But you know what? It's turning cool now, and that ice is going to regain itself. And when we look from Stephen Goddard here, global warming crisis, it's on that same 60-year pattern. So when it does get to the warm point, of course, there's less Arctic ice. When it comes cool again, like it is now, along with the grand solar minimum, we have the 2 cycles going cool. You look at today's windy map, and where is it snowing? I circled in orange where it's still snowing. And you see up on Greenland, and you also see over in that same exact area of eastern Canada that was green. And also down in Asia. Let's bring your attention back here to Greenland ice sheet. This is the surface mass budget, meaning how much ice is gaining on the surface. Now that blue line is this year, and you can see something anomalous. There's much more snow and ice up on that southern part of Greenland. So why is it that sudden twist completely the opposite of what they're telling us in the media, that it's losing ice right now when it clearly shows gaining? That's from Danish Meteorological Institute, who also puts out the temperatures up in the North Pole. It's actually 80 degrees north up to 90 degrees north, encompassing the entire North Pole. That red line is where we are now. It's still below normal temperatures up there. Has been for what, 2 weeks now? And looking at Knoll School directly at the North Pole, it's still just a little bit under freezing. But see, this is the thing. What's happening in Canada with the circulation currents in the Atlantic is affecting France as well. Year without a summer. That's, regardless, it's not volcanic ash, but I'm showing you this is a perfect example of the map of where it's going cold first in Europe because the changes we're starting to see in these currents. Notice in central France there how dark and blue it is. The vineyards are the first thing lost. And this is the map I put out, 3 months ago, saying that these areas would continue to experience losses. And right away, a huge hailstorm wipes out 5,000 hectares in the Burgundy region there. Dark red. So when I say that in Canada, these areas already here that are circled in red have experienced year-on-year losses, and they're following a trend. The wheat in Nebraska, the wheat in Kansas, the corn over in Ontario, the canola and wheat in Alberta. I mean, if things play out the way they're going to anyway in the grand solar minimum, the wheat growing area of Canada is going to reduce down to that 2 degrees Celsius little raindrop shape there in Manitoba. And taking a look at the cooling event, 40 years, this is what they're talking about, moving zones when it gets cooler. 1 degree Celsius drop, 2 degrees Celsius drop. The 1 degree Celsius is that dark black line. Talking about shifting 144 kilometers per degree drop. So 2 degrees Celsius drops a minimum 180 miles further south. And keep in mind, this is just one single place on the planet. This is happening everywhere in the northern and southern hemisphere. Just some areas are showing earlier signs of the changeover than others. This area in France, Western Europe is showing, and here too. So keep your eye there. And there's others popping up as we speak. South Africa as well is another good one to look at. It's regional, it's happening, and we're going to have to find some solutions. So we might as well start talking about the problem and where we go from here. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. On my site, oilseedcrops.org, I put up a couple different plantation overviews and what kind of crops could be moved to different areas. I think there's 8 on there right now. It'd be interesting if you're looking for more information.